Hello. I've been thinking again about these unidentified anomalous phenomena slash UFOs slash orbs slash strange things flying about over New Jersey. I am aware that for most of the world these are either marginal or non-existent in their awareness, and it may never come to anything. It may just be fantasy and science fiction and I don't know what. On the other hand, it is really fascinating, and there are so many people putting out videos on YouTube talking about it, talking to scientists who claim to know something about it, people who've been involved with governmental projects, etc. So I've been thinking about it, and I wanted to kind of get my thoughts in order. There was Jake Barber. He flew a helicopter and he reported a very visceral sensation of emotion coming from the egg that he transported, which is interesting but inconclusive. There's Louis Elizondo, who's written a book, given reports to congressional hearings, they call them. Then I was listening to a long interview with a guy called Dr. Stephen Greer. He has a bit of a spiel. He speaks very well, very fluently, very convincingly, and you get caught up in what he's saying. And it's only afterwards you begin to think, was that really reasonable, what he was saying? He says he's spoken to many people. He's made a movie called Contact, apparently. He sells an app which is meant to put interested people together so they can conduct their own experiments in contacting the extraterrestrials slash unidentified, anomalous, whatever, the aliens, I don't know what you call them. I bought his app. It wasn't that expensive, but I'm not finding it at all useful. It gives you a list of people who have also bought the app who live within the area, and I contacted about 12 of them. Only one's replied, and only kind of a very brief reply so far. I'm not sure how useful that will be, because what he seems to be advocating is that people get together in groups and practice this distant viewing or kind of telepathic communication, because if you do it as a group it's supposed to work better. And you go out into a wild place in the dark and you all focus on attracting one of these entities, and if you're lucky, one of them will kind of appear in the sky and come a bit close, and maybe you'll even see entities. He claimed in this interview I was watching that he had photos of these things taken in such a circumstance. I looked at them. One of the photos could easily be a flame. It was blurry and it didn't look at all like any kind of a individual. The other one was kind of the alien that has a big head and a kind of thin body, and it was floating in the air, and it looked as though it was a doll, a model that had been tossed up and its limbs were kind of flying out. But neither of them were clear enough to be able to say, yes, that is a photo of a being on the same level as a photo of, like you're seeing me now. I mean, they just weren't. So he's got these claims. The aircraft have been operational since the mid-50s. They've cracked the code to gravity control. Electromagnetic gravitics, he calls it, which is a fancy term for who knows what. He claims that the ETs are in contact with the government, and the government or some kind of shady organisation, either connected or not connected with the government, has claimed control of various crashcraft, and has retro-engineered them and created their own craft. And he's got this huge story about how they've conducted a psyops policy where they send out these man-made craft pretending to be aliens and abducting people in order to make people afraid of the aliens. But in fact, he claims the aliens are all friendly and well-meaning and good, and it's all the bad government. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, really. How would the government send aircraft, even assuming it could create one of these things? And he's saying they actually dressed up as aliens, as little greys. They got people to dress up, and later on they managed to bioengineer model greys to pretend to be the real ones so they could abduct people. None of it makes any more sense than the actual stories of people being abducted by actual aliens, to be honest. And he claims to have all this knowledge, but he gives no evidence as to how he obtained this knowledge and why we should believe him. I just think if we're going to start blindly attracting these things, these forces from the sky, and we don't know what they are, and we've only got his word for it that they're friendly, might we not be treading in dangerous waters, attracting things that we didn't mean to attract? There's always good and bad. There's good and bad amongst humans, there's good and bad amongst dogs, there's good and bad in mythologies. Why would the aliens be different and all be good? It doesn't make sense. So I'm a bit suspicious of the idea of getting together with a bunch of people, and it sounds like a seance, you know, the old-fashioned idea of the seance. You all sit around the table and you join hands and it's all dark, and the medium says, "Is there anybody there?" And something appears and you don't know what it is, and the medium tells you what it is, and it just sounds like that. And that was usually faked, let's face it. There haven't been credible stories of mediums actually manifesting things from beyond. So I'm suspicious of this guy. Then there's another one, Courtney Brown, I was listening to the other day. He also is very fluent, very glib, very credible sounding. He claims to have all sorts of information. He doesn't say where he got it from or how we know that he has the true version. He's got this story about the whole of Earth being a prison colony. Throughout cosmic history, or at least the history of the Earth, we, or humans as a species, I suppose, have been deposited on Earth in physical bodies to keep them out of the way of everybody else, because we are really energetic beings who can't be destroyed, and the only way you can cope with beings that you don't want to have around is to encase them in a body and stick them on an Earth out of the way. Which sounds kind of interesting, but then you have to read the comments of these videos, because in the comments several people are saying that this idea that he's promoting comes straight out of a science fiction story. He even mentions a term, ISBY, which is used to refer to these beings, and apparently, according to these people, it comes out of the science fiction story. And then again, these people tend to have a bit of a saviour complex, these people who give their glib messaging in interviews on YouTube. This guy claims that he is not like other people. Other people are reincarnations of people who, you know, when you die, you're supposed to go towards the light and the light attracts you. Well, he claims that this light is actually an AI entity somewhere out there in the cosmos, which is programmed to draw people in and zap them with a kind of cosmic bolt of lightning that shocks them into forgetting all their history. And then the aliens come along and say, look, wouldn't you like to go back, and this thing happened and this thing happened, and if you go back and re-engage in your karma, you can clear it all up. And so these beings, having been zapped and not knowing what's going on, agree to be reincarnated onto the dreadful prison colony Earth. And so they go round and round and round. Well, this is kind of all mixed up with Eastern philosophy. But he claims, is different. He managed to reincarnate without having to be zapped first, and so he remembers everything. He doesn't tell us everything in the interview, and one suspects he could easily make it up if he did tell us. And what evidence is there? He and his son are both these special beings, and in fact throughout his childhood he was protected by 4 greys, you know, the aliens with the big eyes, 2 on each side of his bed every night, guarding him against the baddies. So he doesn't think they're all good. He thinks there are goodies and baddies, like angels and devils kind of idea. And if there is any truth in any of it, I kind of incline to that point of view, in fact. I don't know how much I should believe him, but if there are aliens kind of flying around the earth and cloaking themselves so we can't see them and all this stuff, just like science fiction, but if they are real, if they're really there, if these lights that so many people have reported seeing in the sky, and the experiences they've reported of having had time lapses and mysterious things happen to their bodies, if all that's true, then I suppose it would be good to know more about it. Oh, another thing that these guys talk about is there's going to be a disclosure. There's got to be a disclosure soon. The government's hiding things, or the the military-industrial complex is hiding everything very, very carefully from us so that we don't see very much. But it's important that it all gets out. Well, I agree. I'm of the opinion that the more we know, the better. The internet's amazing. We found out a lot. Maybe people are trying to suppress the internet because they think we shouldn't know everything. So yeah, bring it on. Let's find out more about these people that are sharing our space, if indeed they are. So anyway, I wrote out a list of thoughts about this, which I would now like to read to you. So I've got 3 questions. Question number 1 is, what are the things that people call UFOs or UAPs? What are they? So what do we know about them? The general person in the street, or, person in front of their camcorder. We know that they emit light and they move. So I think we can safely conclude that they use energy in one form or another. We have heard that they reportedly react to people looking at them, sending thoughts to them, waving at them, flashing lights at them. They react. So that means they appear to be sentient. So they use energy, they appear to be sentient, but also they don't appear to operate within the physical medium of air or water, because although you see them in the air, and sometimes they're seen in the water as well, they don't move through it in the way our vehicles move. They appear not to be subject to friction or resistance, which to me means that they're not actually operating within those media. They just appear to be. So my last observation about what they are is the things they most resemble are mythological, the subject of stories. They resemble angels and demons, or fairies, or ETs. So basically we don't know what they are, although various people have said they do know what they are. We can't really take their word for it. All we know is that they're similar to things which have been reported by various people but have not been corroborated in any way. My second question, what can be known about them? Well, unfortunately, all that appears possible to be known about them at the moment is the reports of people. Without physical contact, it's hard to know anything for sure. And we haven't had physical contact, not that we know of. Physical contact, I think, must mean downed craft and dead bodies, because all the other kinds of contact have not been physical in the sense that we're familiar with. And there's no evidence of downed craft and dead bodies that's been allowed to be accessible to the public. If there is such evidence, it has been kept so secret that it has to be discounted until such time as the secrecy is lifted. Otherwise it's just hearsay. Any other contact is problematic because it's scientifically inaccessible. It consists of encounters that cannot be repeated, and if they're close and personal, they appear not to be physical. So far we have no proof of physical contact with physical entities. For example, where you'd expect there to be greetings and handshakes and friendly selfies and, physical evidence that can be shared. And I wouldn't count Stephen Greer's desert seances if all the evidence he's got is those 2 photos I mentioned. Speculation suggests non-human living or energetic entities using craft with non-human technology, coming either from a distant planet or via a different dimension. Speculation suggests they have not so far had overtly malicious intent towards our planet, but that if they did, we would not have the means to stop them. They have the advantage over us. Various harms to humans have been reported, such as radiation burns, organ damage, being abducted and interfered with. These harms could be viewed as not intentionally hostile, because after all, humans have done these kind of things to each other and to other animals in the past. We've done nuclear tests. We've done laboratory experiments on rats and other animals. We do these things as a matter of course. We don't think we're harming things unless we're an animal rights activist, I guess. So, yeah, there's nothing has happened so far that we could put our finger on it and say, yes, that's definitely malicious in intent. But we don't know. So my third question, is communication possible between UAPs and humans? And it's all about communication, I think. There has to be communication. Some people have said they thought the UAP they saw was aware of them and reacted to their thoughts or signals. And when actual entities have invaded human space, like suddenly appeared in their bedroom or on the road where they're driving, some humans have reported receiving a telepathic communication from the entities. What is not clear is whether a telepathic communication between humans and non-human entities can be established on an equal footing. So that is, with exchanges of information and an increase of knowledge on both sides. What's happened so far appears to be just the aliens putting ideas or sensations into the humans' consciousness, and humans being like helpless lab rats and not really able to respond or learn anything, which obviously we would like to be able to do. Stephen Greer's project for facilitating what he calls close encounters of the fifth kind seems to involve circles of people sitting in the desert in the dark and psychically inviting UAPs to come down and contact them. He is convinced that the entities are harmless and that all harms have been perpetrated by government agents using reverse-engineered alien technology and manufactured aliens in order to spread fear and disinformation and set us up to be hostile towards aliens. But we only have his word for this. I don't see him giving any scientific evidence for these assumptions. So I think we can discount them. It may be that our backs are against the wall and we have no choice but to do our best to communicate with these entities. It may be that psychic communication is the only means available to us, given the vast differences between us and them. If the communication is psychic, we would not need to invite them to come down into our physical space, and it may be prudent not to do so. So what I'm thinking is, sit there and meditate and get into the right frame of mind to be able to send out psychic feelers. But don't invite them back. If we can't make contact on an equal footing, then we're just victims, aren't we? We're maybe the prisoners on the prison planet, as has been suggested. So if I were to sit in a seance and go into a trance state and try and contact these beings, if I contacted one, the first question I would ask would be, are you friendly, I guess? I don't know how you would ask that or how you would know. And other interesting questions might be, are you a biological entity? Do you eat and breathe and reproduce? Because it seems to me that possibly they're not even biological entities, they're just like energetic. And if you're not, I would want to ask them, well, where does your energy come from? Do you draw energy from some source, or are you kind of self-contained? Because the idea that they could fly through space for, long distances without having a food supply is kind of far-fetched. And the idea that they could wander about on our planet and interact with us and abduct us and all that sort of stuff, suggests that if they are physical, they have the means of breathing our atmosphere, and they can function in our temperature range, and things that you wouldn't really expect if it was a physical entity that had evolved on a different planet in different circumstances, without having to wear special gear. So what do you think about these things? If anybody's had any strange experiences that they'd like to share, please do comment about them, because I find the whole thing absolutely fascinating, and as you can tell, I don't know that much about it. See you next time. Bye.